And we're back with Truth Unrestricted, the podcast that will be about some very important things on another episode, but not this episode because we just want to goof around with some game stuff today.
Wait, is this new information that you haven't told me?
Yes, that's right. It's information that was known to me, but not to you.
Oh man, I hate
Yes.
it when that happens.
Well, it happens all the time, and we're going to get into it right now. So, game theory is an area of mathematics that is super fun, but most people who kind of study it casually don't think it is. It's things that mathematicians like, but most of the people, it seems cool, and then they start to read it and they go, but it should be fun because it has almost no numbers. And that's the thing that most people hate about math is that it has all these numbers in the way and they have to worry about their arithmetic skills and all that stuff.
Well,
But
and
game
letters
theory has, well, and
and
symbols and all that stuff.
symbols and
You can have symbols in game
you
theory,
know.
but you don't need them for most stuff. It's mostly like theory about logic.
Hmm.
And so I think it's great. And of course, you, as your internet fame is you deal with games,
Yes,
and they're almost all strategy related games.
yes. We should probably mention who I am.
Oh yeah, okay. I assumed everyone would know who you are. You know who you are, and I don't know who you are. This is, of
See,
course,
we were leaving the audience without full information.
that's right. So, of course, I'm here today with David Bloomberg, well-known voice on this podcast, podcaster of reality television, particularly Survivor,
Hmm.
the game. Not everyone is into Survivor, but that's okay. He also plays poker. Uh, I don't. What level do you play poker at? Semi-professionally
Oh
or not
no, no,
quite? No,
just
no. Is that not?
no,
Oh, no, no.
no,
Just
just hobby level, but making money.
serious hobby
Um,
level. Okay,
yes,
right.
serious
Okay.
hobby level, we'll call it.
I think if you make money, you're professional at it, David. I think that's the. Isn't that
No,
the
and I
the
really
line?
didn't. I didn't make any money on it. Because um, just in case anyone from any
Oh,
tax agency is, I actually didn't make any money
oh,
on it.
yeah,
I
yeah. Okay.
I, I
Well,
broke dead even.
well, good for you. That's
Hmm.
according to the gambler. That's the goal.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Get to know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
Know when to
Yeah.
walk away. Know when to
Yeah.
run.
Right. And know when to. Have you ever had to run away?
No, I have played at card room. Yeah, I did have to run away one time.
Oh, neat.
There was I was we were playing a game that maybe wasn't recognized by the laws of the land,
Mm,
and
yeah.
the owner of the room uh, heard that something was coming, and so we were in the middle of a tournament,
Mm,
which a tournament should be perfectly legal,
mm.
but we were in the middle of a tournament, and I remember very vividly as the owner of the location suddenly came walking down the hallway saying, "Everyone wants to be somewhere else right now." And there was no question. Every single person
Wow.
who was there knew exactly what that meant.
Where they'd rather be at that moment. Wow. That's
Yes.
well.
And as we got to the parking lot and got in our cars, a whole bunch of sheriff's cars were coming in, lights and sirens. Now, they didn't stop anyone.
Yeah.
They did question a couple people who were not smart enough to leave. But their main goal was to roust the room.
Yeah.
Just
Shut the game
stop
down.
it.
Yeah.
Stop the complaints coming in from other people who were there, because it wasn't the card game that was the problem. It was the people hanging out outside
Mm.
and bothering other nearby businesses, apartments, and even a church.
Mm.
So,
You can't bother churches. Not in the U.S.
yeah,
I've heard that.
yeah. But that was the one time I did have to run. There were other situations where some people in rooms that I had been in had to run because someone tried to rob the room,
Mm.
and but you know
I believe
these are
in
all
some
things you didn't.
industries they call that breakage. Just a thing that
Yes,
happens. You just deal with
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Sometimes the room gets robbed. Wow.
yeah. Yeah.
So, brief introduction to game theory for anyone who's listening who doesn't understand that there is an entire vocabulary around this. So let's get into it. Strategy games really are just games in which the decisions that players make can affect the outcome. Now, it seems at first that that's all games, right? But some games are not strategy games. Some games are
Hmm.
just skill games. So you can look at, the Olympics. There's very
Hmm.
little strategy involved in any of the Olympic games. A
Eh,
couple, well,
eh.
basketball or whatever sports, but running, if you're going to run, you're pretty
I
much just running.
mean,
The 100
it
meter dash is
depends.
not a
The
strategy
100-meter
game.
dash, yes, but a marathon, there's strategy in
Yeah,
when
okay.
you know how to save your energy and when you want to
Yeah, that's true.
do it. And biking events, there's strategy in terms of drafting from your fellow competitors.
Yep,
Um, you know, even
I'll buy
Winter
that.
Olympics games, in speed skating and things like that.
So when I think of a game that has no decisions at all that will affect the outcome, I think of
Hmm.
snakes and ladders.
That's what I was thinking of, except we call it shoots and ladders. But yes,
Okay, yeah, right. Is it because you don't like snakes? Indiana
it's
Jones thing?
because it's yeah. Why'd it have to be snakes?
Yeah.
It's because that's what it's called here.
Oh, okay.
The game is called shoots and
We
ladders
probably got
here,
snakes
and
and ladders from the British. That makes sense.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
they're a bunch of
And,
snakes.
and
Yeah,
then and then of course the US wanted to rename it because they rename all the British things because to
snakes are scary.
snub
You
their
don't want
nose at the
kids.
British.
You don't want kids.
Yeah.
Being scared of the game.
Yeah, I guess.
And also, let's face it. You slide down a chute. You don't slide down a snake.
It did seem weird to slide down a snake as a kid when I played
Yeah,
that game, yeah. But I
yeah,
quickly realized I only played it a couple times because it was immediately boring to me. I realized that there was nothing I
yes,
could do to make the game work in my favor.
yeah.
And
Much like
and
Candyland.
I never played Candyland. What is that?
Candyland is the same. I mean, it's a
Oh,
game
yeah,
for toddlers,
yeah,
basically, where you
sure.
flip over a card and you move to that space. There's no thought
Yeah.
involved. And it's like shoots and ladders.
Another game that has no player decisions involved is War. Classic card game War, where you just flip the card over, whoever's highest, and also no decisions at all made in that
Hey,
game by
they even
players.
made a song about that. War. What is it good for?
Yeah,
Absolutely nothing.
that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
it just wastes a lot of time, which in the
Hmm.
era of the 80s before we had the internet, that made sense to just give kids a deck of cards and have them, spend the entire day playing War.
Yeah.
If you wanted to spend more time, just give them 3 or 4 decks.
Hmm.
But really, it's silly.
Yeah.
So strategy games are just about decisions, and if you can make a better decision, then you will have a better outcome, and that's the whole point. So this isn't the only way in which these games are divided up. So what I really want to talk about is the notion of how information is used in games. So there's a distinction in game theory for what's called perfect and imperfect information games.
Hmm.
Perfect information is when both players have all the information. So they have the same
Right.
information, but they have all the information. That's a
Right.
unique distinction. So chess is the classic perfect information game.
Hmm.
All the pieces are on the board. The board is visible to all players at all times. Everyone has access to all the information that they need to make a move.
Hmm.
So it's only strategy that's determining any outcome here.
Yeah. A
And
simpler would be tic-tac-toe.
tic-tac-toe is also a perfect
Hmm.
information game. They're not. You'll notice in these games they're turn-based, so who goes first has an advantage.
Right.
They're not perfectly even in as far as advantages go, but each player does have the same information.
Right.
So then we get into imperfect information games. Generally speaking, most games are in the imperfect information category where there are things that are unknown to the players. But even here, we have a division. We have one time where you have uniform imperfection. So this is a game where both players have information, but they all have the same information. So I'm going to pull up Monopoly as a game
Hmm.
where this is the case. The board is known to all players. There are cards, chance and community chests that are overturned. You don't know what order they're coming in or what's going
Hmm.
to happen there. And there's also dice to roll, and you don't know what the dice is going to roll for each player.
Maybe you don't. I do.
Do you?
Mm.
Really? So
Hmm.
it brings me to the point is that Monopoly would be a completely different game if, and follow me here, if
Hmm.
instead of rolling the dice for each turn, before you started the game, you just rolled the dice like 200 times in a row and wrote down all the numbers in a sequence and then just used them in that sequence as you went. And you knew what your next roll and your next 20 rolls were going to be as you went. And of course, that would be a different game if you knew what your roles were, but not the other player's
Right.
roles, and if they knew what their roles were, not yours, versus if you both knew what each other's roles
Oh,
were.
right. Yeah, you could
Right.
look ahead and say, "Oh, I'm
Right.
going to
And you could
build all
plan
my
for
houses,"
when
and
they're going to
yeah,
land on your property
right.
and right. So that just that information, making that information available versus unavailable changes the whole game. And Monopoly is the board would be the exact same. The amount of money you get as you cross go would
Hmm.
be the exact same. But the entire way that you look at the game would be completely changed just with this
Right.
very small change in who has the information and who doesn't.
Right.
Right. So this is a very important aspect to the idea of playing games, to the idea of using strategies to advantage. So uniform, like I say, uniform imperfect information games are ones in which both players or perhaps all players in the case of Monopoly have uh, um, not all the information, but they all have the same information. By the way, a
Hmm.
very old game that's exactly like this is backgammon.
Hmm.
Same idea. You get it's a lot of strategy in backgammon, but you don't, it's hard to implement exactly because you don't know what your role is going to be. Good
Right.
backgammon players try to put themselves in positions where they can use any role to get an advantage, but that's more difficult. That's very advanced, right?
Right.
Um, so then we get into the non-uniform imperfect information games, which is where when I pointed out Monopoly, where everyone has the same information, but you don't know it all. When we pointed out the point where
Hmm.
they roll all the dice in advance and each one has access to their own rolls, but not the opponent's rolls, that would be non-uniform,
Hmm.
imperfect information because each player has different information just to themselves. So, by the way, this is also where poker is, right? You know what
Right.
your cards are, and you don't know what the opponent's cards are. You're left to try to find out in some other way what their cards might be like.
Right.
And the strategy you use to find that out is a big part of the game. In fact, for people in the upper leagues, it's the entire game. It's not even related to the
Right.
cards. It's just related to their ability to properly read the other player and confuse the other player in trying to read them.
Yes.
Right. And of course, I don't play poker. I've played it probably 5 times total in my whole life, and only
Okay.
twice after 20 years old. So I know kind
Okay.
of, I'm not even sure I could exactly determine the order of the rank of the hands.
Well, then we should definitely play.
Oh, right. Absolutely. Not today, another day, but sure, David, we will play. Definitely. We'll definitely, yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
we'll do that. Yeah. But it's not about the cards, right? So it shouldn't matter.
Uh, I mean, it's still about the cards, but it's also, if you don't know what you're actually, sometimes people who don't know what they're doing, it's the most difficult people to play against.
Right.
I've discussed this somewhere. I don't remember where, but possibly on here. But sometimes people, newer players, will think that they have a really strong hand
Hmm.
when it's not.
Right.
And they will be putting off a read that they are really strong.
Yeah.
And you'll be sitting there
You could be
going,
fooled by it. Right.
yeah. And you'll be like, oh, they must have a really strong hand. And then you fold and they triumphantly turn something over that you could have beaten because it's not
Yeah.
a
And they're
really
like two
strong hand.
pair. Oh,
Yeah. And
well,
so it is a situation where, yeah, sometimes people like that, they're successful for a little while before they become unsuccessful.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's a really bad path for people, I can tell you.
Well, it just sort of like a temporary boost that as soon as you try to average it out over a large number of, say, rolls of the dice
Mm-hmm.
over a much longer time frame, you might get temporarily lucky too. But
But that's the worst. I mean, I have seen it, depending on your personality. The worst thing that can happen to some people is to get lucky early in poker,
hmm,
because then they keep playing that way.
yeah, well,
Like there
they
was a
think it's going to
guy,
work. Yeah.
right, I remember very clearly. There was a guy who came in, he was pretty new, and he was the type who would play any two cards almost. And there were times I vividly remember I had pocket aces, best starting hand in Texas Hold'em.
Hmm.
And he had 7-4 offsuit, one of the worst. And we somehow ended up all in. He was, I don't know, trying to push me out or something. And he won, because even pocket aces against a random hand has an 81% chance of winning, which means a 19% chance of losing.
Yeah.
And he won. And this was the way he played. And he got lucky early.
Hmm.
And then his luck ran out.
Yeah.
And he went through all his money. And then he borrowed money. And then he decided to stop by and play poker when he was supposed to be running the cash from the business he worked at to the bank.
Hmm.
And he played with that money. And he lost that money. And then he lost his job. And yeah, he even had a tattoo on his arm that said, "Make good decisions." And clearly he did not look at his forearm often enough. But he's not the only one. I have seen people go on a run of good luck early and play bad and not understand that it was just luck and end up worse for the wear than if they had just started and realized, oh, this is a bad way to play.
Yeah, if the sum total of your good decisions is to put a tattoo on your arm that says "make good decisions," then that's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it has to extend past that.
Right.
So we have another aspect to how information and strategy coincide in games. In that some games allow for cooperation between players and some just don't.
Mm-hmm.
So poker, to the very best of my knowledge, doesn't have a cooperation level.
It shouldn't. I have been in games where people were illegally cooperating.
Right.
That's called cheating, though.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
like even within the confines of the game, it doesn't really try to it's not anyone's interest to both be betting into the same player to try to up the thing for another player or something. It's not really that useful, is it? It's
Oh, it can be.
yeah.
I mean, I have been in games where, in a casino where these people have played against each other regularly.
Yeah.
They know each other. I mean, you get to know people, you become friends.
Okay.
And then there was another person who was like an out of towner,
Mm.
and they would, one would bet, like the out of towner would bet, and then the regular would raise, and then the other regular would re-raise.
Mm.
And the out of towner would be like, wow, okay, they must have really good hands here. I'm going to fold. Well, no, it was really just a form of collusion to get the out of towner out of the pot. And sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not intentional. I was in a game, we were out of town, but we went as a group. We still played against each other, but maybe not as hard as we would in our regular home game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was sitting there, and it just so happened the way we had been seated, I was next to a friend of mine, and someone had bet, and he had raised, and I re-raised.
Mm.
And it came back around, and I think the other person called, and he folded. He folded pocket kings.
Mm.
Okay. Again, second best possible hand. I had pocket aces. Now, did I tell him that? No, I did not. Would I have bet that way anyway? Yes, I would have. You don't want to, like I said, you have an 81% chance against one opponent. Against two random hands, that goes down further.
Mhm.
So you want to try and limit it. He folded because he knew the way I played, and he knew that I knew the way he played.
Mhm.
And he knew that I would not, under most circumstances, re-raise him unless I basically had pocket aces.
Right.
Now, the other people at this table didn't know that. Again, it goes back to imperfect and incomplete information.
Right.
It wasn't intentional collusion. It was he had certain information about me that the other players didn't have. So I've seen it both ways, where there's intentional collusion and unintentional just by virtue of knowing people.
Right. But even in that case, only one of you won the hand, right?
Yes.
Unless you had
Yes.
some kind of agreement to like split your winnings after the game when you drove other
Right. Which
players
we did
off.
not.
Right.
Yeah.
There
Right.
really is no, it doesn't really help anyone to do this. It's not that kind of game, right?
Right. Now
Yeah.
there are people who make those agreements,
Yeah.
that they will
And
go
that's
in
got to
and
be seen as
say,
cheating to everyone at the table, I
right.
think, right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That if they find out,
Yeah.
but
Right.
a lot of times they don't find out because,
It must be hard
you
to
know,
catch. Yeah.
right. I mean, I have been in games where husbands and wives have played against each other, where brothers have played against each other.
Yeah.
Now every time I saw the husband and wife play against each other, they were playing to win.
Yeah.
But you also have to know when they get home at night, they're splitting that money.
Oh,
The
yeah.
money
Yeah.
all belongs to the same couple.
Yeah.
And so, in a perfect situation, like if you're in a casino, yeah, maybe don't stick the husband and wife together. But if you're in a home game and there's only a few tables,
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard not to. Plus, sometimes they just want to sit next to each other,
Yeah.
you know?
So, when we talk about Survivor, Survivor is a game very much that allows for quite a bit of cooperation, and that cooperation
Yes.
works directly in with the strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Survivor has team challenges that are
Right.
strictly part of the game where you have to cooperate strictly as part of those, and usually you don't get a large choice as far as who's on your team.
Right.
Uh, and there's, voluntary cooperation where you can work together with other people to vote a
Mm-hmm.
particular person out.
Right.
And this is a game that's built, in my mind anyway, whenever I watch it, it's built on this information interplay. How much you trust other players, how much they trust you,
Mm-hmm.
how much are you going to tell them when you have an advantage, if you don't have an advantage, uh, whether you tell the truth about these things, whether you tell a lie and they can't tell what you're lying about, but they know you're lying, right?
Right.
We talked about this a little bit when we talked about dishonesty, how in games like Survivor, this can be very dangerous just to
Yes.
try to lie at all. And surprisingly few players get away with being dishonest in this way, right?
Yeah, because everybody knows that you're lying about that you're
Something.
likely
Yeah,
lying.
something's off and they get a twinge, right? And they don't
Right.
necessarily know what it is you're lying about, but it doesn't matter.
I just mean in
Yeah.
going into the game,
Yeah.
if you don't know that people are going to lie to you, then you
Mm.
are a fool.
Yeah, they're gonna, yeah,
You know.
I,
Um,
for sure. Yeah.
if you rewatch, I just rewatched an old season, and one of the winner did not get all the votes at the end because three people were like, "You were dishonest, and I don't want to vote for you."
Mm,
And it's like, because in those early seasons, people didn't quite get it yet,
right.
or some people didn't quite get it yet.
Yeah.
Now it's a lot more expected. Now, I'm not going to say everybody subscribes to the same thing, but people know
Mm,
it's not a matter of if you're lying to me, it's when you're lying to me.
yeah.
But then it can also be, like you said, about specific things. Like there was, not the most recent season, but the season prior, near the end, a guy was trying to plan this move out. And he was working with a woman who he had not worked with before because they didn't really trust each other. And through it, he wasn't going to do anything to hurt her chances, but he was trying to do something to make himself look better.
Mhm.
But she could tell he was lying.
Right.
And she presumed it was going to be something that would negatively affect her.
Yeah.
And therefore, she turned it around and changed up what was happening from what they had discussed. And as it turned out, she ended up keeping in the game the person who went on to win.
Mm.
Whereas if she had gone along with his plan, that person would have been knocked out. And so, yeah, like you said, sometimes you could tell someone's lying. You're just not sure what they're lying about.
Yeah. And so when I think about the meta perspective of this, like the meta thinking thing where you're aware that the other person is being inauthentic and you're trying to react authentically to that. Um, First of all, a player becomes aware that the other player that they're talking to isn't being totally honest.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in that moment, a player who starts to notice this gives away any advantage by acting in any way as if they don't fully believe them. Like, I
Right.
think it's always in their interest to act as though everything they're told is the truth, even if they are not going to
Yes.
believe it. If someone's going to lie to you, it's better for you to let the person lying to you think that that lie was successful. And
Yes.
so you get a lot of, that adds a whole other layer to this interplay of information that you got some information from them. They told you something. You understand or you feel strongly that it's not
Mm-hmm.
true, but in pretending like it is true or pretending like you believe them, you deny them additional information about you and what you know.
Right.
And then this goes on down the line, right? I mean, those turtles go all the way down forever.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there are definitely times when two people are going at one another and they will sit there at camp and talk about how great it is that they're working together.
Mm.
And both of them know. And there was
No.
a scene
Yeah.
on a great series of scenes on the most recent season where two people had worked together the whole game. And then both of them had the idea to get rid of the other one at the same time.
Yeah.
And there were intercut scenes of one saying, well, I'm going to go after her, but I don't think she's coming after me yet. And then it flipped to her saying, I'm going after him, but I don't think he has thought of coming after me yet.
Mm.
And meanwhile, they're both lying to each other completely
Yeah.
about it. But yeah, this goes back to something, for people who don't know, I have a series of what I call the rules for winning Survivor. And within one of those rules is what I call the Ghostbusters provision. Because in Ghostbusters, of course, the famous line is, if somebody asks you if you're a god, you say yes.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And so my provision is, if someone asks if you want to be in an alliance, you say yes. It doesn't
Yes.
matter if you never want to work with them.
Right.
You say yes, because if you say no, it's like you just said, you're giving them information.
Yeah.
Oh, this person doesn't want to work with me.
Right.
Therefore, I must target them.
Yeah.
Don't even say I'll think about it. Because the minute, I mean, there are some people who I'm like, well, I didn't want to be dishonest. So I told them that I would think about it. No, you say yes. And then you worry about it later.
Yeah. This isn't a date to the prom. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, these games become very, very interesting when examined in this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are looking for information in each time you're talking to them, and you're also looking to not give any information away.
Right.
And I'm going to throw this in. It wasn't in the notes, but we're going to go straight to the traders, actually, because this is a very information related game, right?
Right. Well, in theory.
For people who aren't very familiar with the traders, the concept is it's sort of like Survivor in that people get removed sort of one at a time, but they're done
Mm-hmm.
in a very unique way. So you'll
It's more
get,
like the game Mafia, if you've ever played
yeah,
Mafia.
probably fewer people. I've never heard of Mafia before, but
Okay.
only when I listen to it on the podcast you do. But um, essentially, you get 20 people in a game.
Mm-hmm.
Some number, usually three, are selected as traders. They know who they are, and no one else knows who they are.
Right.
So already you have non-uniform imperfect information.
Hmm.
And then each day, the game doesn't last that long. It's like 1 day per episode, but
Right.
each day, each episode, the entire group of people votes one person out, ostensibly
Hmm.
because they're trying to remove a traitor.
Very ostensibly, yes.
Very ostensibly, like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's implied by the game. It's not necessarily
Right.
what each player does when they do it,
Right.
but the on the surface level,
Yes.
you're saying that you're voting someone
Hmm.
out because they're a traitor. And then after that one person is voted out, ostensibly because they're a traitor or for that
Hmm.
reason, the traitors then go on their own to a dark room and they collude together. They conspire to
Hmm.
assassinate one player. They don't really kill them
Yes.
because this is
Yes.
just television, but they remove them from the game.
Yes.
Right. And so uh in the space of the game, when you're a traitor, you're trying to figure out who else thinks you might be a traitor.
Hmm.
And you're probably trying to convince people that other people are traitors. And
Right.
when you're not a traitor, you're trying to figure out who the traitors are because all the information you don't know is valuable for you.
Right.
But as soon as you know and other people know that you know, that's bad. So if you know who a
Yes.
traitor is and the traitor knows that you know, you're going to get removed by the traitors.
Yeah.
So it's a lot about finding out, but not letting anyone know that you found out in a
Right.
lot of cases, right? And that's a very interesting set of I don't know. I haven't watched all the seasons that you have of the
Hmm.
show. They've had seasons in 2 seasons in Australia, New Zealand. I think is
New
that
Zealand,
two? Has it? Yeah,
UK.
UK's had several.
Hmm.
US has had 2 seasons. Canada had a
Yeah.
season. There's been seasons in other countries that had other
Right.
languages that I've never seen. I don't know if you've seen any, but
No.
um, I haven't seen nearly the number of seasons you have. So I don't know if they're more interesting than the ones I've seen, which have just been the 2 US and the one
Hmm.
Canadian season. But I think that we've yet to find a large pool of players that are playing this with these strategies in mind. We've found some in each season with
Right.
some success at some of those. But again, I think it's like what you say about playing poker against someone that doesn't really know how to play, is
Hmm.
that sometimes you read the wrong thing because they're not really rational actors in this space, right?
Right. And, the problem with the US version, and to a lesser extent in the Canadian version, is that they included, um, for lack of a better term, celebrities.
Minor celebrities usually, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, it depends on where you are. I mean, in the
Well,
second,
from your
well, in
angle, they
the
might be a really right celebrity. Yeah. For a
right, because
Survivor
they were
player on there, for a guy that's
right,
followed Survivor, they're a big star, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. And so, US versions have gone completely to the celebrity version of
Right.
it, bringing
Only
back
celebrities.
other,
Yeah.
right. And there's a definite difference between bringing back people from reality TV who are just on reality TV to be famous, like housewives, or reality TV competition shows. And we saw this very clear divide in the second season of The Traders, where certain people knew how to play a game and other people did not know how to play a game.
Yeah.
And so, there was that situation. And I think that, I mean, the reason I want to watch The Traders is to see people play a game.
Yeah. Good strategy.
Right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the US, that's not ever going to happen again. They're going to bring back celebrities, celebriality people, and let them play and let the drama ensue. And if there happens to be good gameplay too, well, then yay.
Hmm.
But the first season there was good gameplay. The second season there was a mix. And we'll have to see. And then you have the UK, which was no celebrities, and the gameplay was much more interesting to me.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's an interesting mix there, but it's definitely this situation of, like you said, imperfect information. Certain
Yeah.
people have all the information, certain people have none of the information. And like you said, if you are not a trader and you figure out who a trader is,
Mm.
you don't necessarily want to vote that person out, because what happens in the game, and this is an important point to notice, is once traders start going out, they get replaced.
Yeah.
Other people are invited to become traders. And so someone who you might have had a perfect read on and know they're not a trader could suddenly become a trader.
Mhm.
And now you're back to not having information again.
Yeah.
So this is why sometimes acting on the information you have is a bad idea, because then you have less information.
Yeah. And the real point is the information. I mean, that I think
Right.
that's a so important to get, is that working through your way through that, and like you say, finding out who is a traitor,
Mm-hmm.
it would be so important. But then also not letting anyone know that you know who that
Right.
is. So what you might want to do is target someone else that you know isn't a traitor
Yes.
as being a traitor.
And the best way to do that is to cozy up to the person you know is a trader and say, hey, you and I can work together. I know this other person is a trader, when
Yeah.
it's someone who's not.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
that person's going to be like, oh, they're on my side and they don't think I'm a traitor. So this is great.
Hmm.
I'll keep them around.
Yeah. Which might be like, even then, you're information exchanging, right? You're letting
Right.
them know things about things that you know, so that they can use them
Right.
as a strategy that helps you as well, in a
Yeah.
symbiotic thing, right?
Right.
Uh, I'm hoping that I get a version of the show where I might have to watch some of the UK versions, because I've heard they're better,
Mm-hmm.
but it would be interesting to see the game played on a level where you get people thinking like this.
Yes.
I think that would be tremendous.
I mean, I do think in
Yeah.
Canada and even US season 2, there was some of that thinking.
Yeah.
It was just somewhat buried.
Yeah. Right. There were some
So
players who were shining lights, I thought,
right,
in those seasons, but
right.
it was difficult to get that through all the other things that were happening, right?
Yes. Yes.
Whereas
And if
once
any
you get all the players who are acting that way, I think you get something really incredible.
Right. Right. And if anyone wants to hear my thoughts on those seasons, I was on the Tradar
That's
podcast,
right.
which you were a guest on for
Yep.
the opening episode of the Canadian version.
Yep.
So that's TRAIDAR, if anyone wants to look that up.
Yeah.
Um, but there's other situations, I think, where this lack of information and the sharing of information comes back around. If we go back to Survivor,
Sure.
there's an issue that comes up again and again, which is a player may be trolling much of the game, but they're doing it secretly. They're in the shadows, because in Survivor, if you're seen as gaining too much power, they get rid of you. They cut down the tall poppies. And so you want to control the game, but you don't want to be seen as controlling the game,
Yeah.
until you get to the end, when a jury of the most recently voted out players, usually about 8 people, determine who wins. And at least in theory, they vote based on who played the best game. In theory.
Hmm.
Not always the case. And so the player who was doing the controlling has to figure out a way to convey to that jury that they were, in fact, the secret mastermind.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It is the toughest balance beam to walk, is to control the game, hide that you're controlling the game, and then kind of give that ta-da moment at the end.
Right. Have them notice it once they're voted off, that
Mm-hmm.
you were controlling the game.
Right. And it's all about, information and imperfect information because you're hiding information,
Hmm.
but then you want to provide the information.
Yeah.
And it's all a matter of how you manage to do that.
So of course, we're not going to tell anyone how to do that. We're still working it out, I think.
Yeah.
We're not here to instruct you how to win Survivor.
Yeah,
We're not going to instruct you how to win Trader,
yeah,
the Trader's game, or poker.
that's a whole different set of podcasts for
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
But
But it is interesting that so many of these things just come down to information, knowing what you
right.
know, knowing what you don't know,
Hmm.
having some idea how to get the information that you don't know. I think about that a lot, a
Yeah.
huge amount. It
And
informs a
also,
lot of the little things that I put on this podcast in other ways that don't
mhm.
involve games.
Well, and also what information is actually pertinent, what's
Mm,
important.
yeah.
Because you can know lots of information that has nothing to do with anything. Like there's another game called The Circle. It's on Netflix.
Mm,
And it is based on the all the interaction is done by text. So these people live in separate apartments and they interact with each other only by text.
mm,
And they have profiles. It's like social media, but the profile can be real, could be fake. And so the fake ones, known as catfishing, uh, for many of its first few seasons, whether it's because production encouraged it or because people just thought this way, a lot of time was spent like, I want to find the catfish. I want to vote out the catfish. I got to get rid of the catfish. And it doesn't matter. What matters is the relationships you make.
mm,
I don't care if you're a woman pretending to be a man pretending to be a woman, someone pretending to be their own son. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you make relationships with those people who will keep you around in the game and will rate you high enough to win at the end.
mm,
And so if you're doing that with a catfish, who cares?
yeah.
And in this most recent season, they had more players who, strategy type players who understood that. But in early seasons, it was dominated by catfish this and catfish that. It's just not important. Even if you had perfect information and knew who the catfish was, it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. So I think we did a real nice intro to, the barest fraction of a thing going on with game theory. It's much, much more complicated than what we did here. It was just a couple of introduction to a couple of terms, but it was fun to talk about in relation to games that we actually deal with.
Yes.
So, where can people find some of the places where you talk about games?
So you can go to my link tree, which is linktree/David Bloomberg. In the URL, there's a dot before the EE in Linktree because that's just the way they do it. I
Mm,
don't know why. And from there are a number of links, including to my, podcasts about Survivor and I think about the traders also, and just various other things. You can also find me often talking reality TV on places like Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads. On Twitter and Blue Sky, I'm at David Bloomberg. On Threads, I'm at David Bloomberg TV. And that's because it's connected to Instagram, and I use at David Bloomberg TV on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And those are all videos about reality TV. So if you want more, some of them are strategy related, some of them are just funny things.
like TikTok does.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I run this little podcast. You can send an email with any kind of feedback or anything else related to that about anything about this episode to truthandrestricted@gmail.com. And this is kind of nice, bright, little light episode about nothing consequential, but oftentimes I'm on Twitter arguing about people about actual reality
Hmm.
and what things are fake and what things are real. At Spencer G. Watson on Twitter, so you can find me there. And yeah, with that, I think we'll sign off. So
All right.
till next time, David.
Till next time.